Welcome and back for our second broadcast in this series. I'm Sarah McMullen. I'm joining you here from Utah from the Arbinger Institute. This is our second presentation in the series, Working Outward, Igniting Growth in Change. Yesterday, we were really fortunate to hear from Mike Renner, and today we're going to hear from Beth Hannan, who's kind of picking up where Mike left off in his presentation. She's going to speak a little bit on how to be proactive in this really stressful situation that we're all in a way that's really responsive to others. And I look forward to hearing from her today. This broadcast is simultaneously streaming on YouTube. So if you have an issue at all with Zoom, please go over to YouTube, search for Arbinger Institute. You'll see the video streaming live there. So that's your best secondary option if you run into any issues. This is also being recorded, so you will receive a link to this presentation via email later. And we ask you to go ahead and share that with anybody who you think might be interested. We love seeing our content distributed to people who get a lot of value out of it. And thus far, these presentations have been really popular and really well received because they all include some great practical information to take and apply right immediately, right as soon as the presentation is over. Speaking of after this presentation being over, Beth is going to take a few extra minutes with me to sit down and dig a little bit deeper into some of the questions that will come up today, which you can go ahead and put in the Q&A section right at the bottom of the screen. And she and I will sit down and kind of talk in a way that allows us to dig more deeply into the questions that you ask in this Q&A, as well as questions that you presented to us as you registered for this webinar. Now, these conversations, these cool Q&As that I get to have with our presenters, those are all separate from the webinars that we create. These webinars are open and live on our YouTube and will also eventually live on our webinars page. These Q&A conversations live exclusively on our webinars page. And so far, every one of them has been fantastic. And I'm really fortunate to be able to conduct these conversations. And I highly recommend going to arbinger.com/webinars to access all of those previous conversations and the one that will be on its way from Beth. It really is very cool to see how many of you are joining from around the world. I see a lot of you introducing yourselves in the chat, and you're from all over the world. I love seeing that. A number of you yesterday shared some of your key takeaways from Mike's presentation, or just where you were sitting at your desk, where you're joining from, and letting us know that you're participating using the hashtag outward mindset. Please keep doing that. I personally love to look for anybody using that hashtag and see what you got out of it. I share some of that feedback we get with our speakers, and I just get a lot of personal enjoyment knowing that there are people who are really getting a lot of value out of what we're offering. So please keep doing that. During this, once Beth starts presenting, you'll notice there'll be a little black bar that comes up between the PowerPoint that she's going to be sharing and her video of her face. So there'll be two little vertical lines that live between those two boxes. When that comes up, adjust your screen left and right. Click on that, pull left and right to put it to whatever setting it is that's the most comfortable for you. You won't be entirely, Zoom isn't entirely control of how you view this presentation, and that's one of the cool advantages of using the webinar feature of Zoom is that little slidey bar. Beth's presentation today is Proactivity, Preparation, and Responsiveness, Insights on How to Move Forward. Questions around this topic have come in really consistently as people have registered, and then just in our conversations that we're having with many of you. So we've invited Beth Hannan to come speak on this topic. Beth is a consultant and facilitator with more than 10 years experience in the healthcare and nonprofit sectors. Her background ranges from supporting grief-stricken families to helping tech entrepreneurs identify their value propositions. Prior to her work with Arbinger, Beth led high-performing teams to increase the number of organ transplants for in-need recipients. She's an influencer and a leader who helps others have great impact, especially and even in times of high stress. And I would like to add that Beth is an absolute gem of a person who is genuinely very beloved by everybody here at Arbinger. And now I am pleased to introduce to you from her home in Austin, Texas, Beth Hannan.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys so you can see. I agree with Sarah. It's been so cool to see everybody joining us from all over the world. And it's funny, people were sharing the weather where they are. And so that just reminded me that today is Earth Day. So happy Earth Day to all of you out there. And here in Austin, Texas, it's really stormy and yucky. So I hope wherever you are, it's the weather's a little bit better and maybe you can make it outside today. So thanks so much for joining us. I know that your time is precious. Look, for the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to be just sharing some insights that I've had as I've reflected during this time, during this quarantine. It's given me lots of time to reflect over, various maybe leadership crises that I've had in the past and how I've handled them, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well. So, so I really hope that I'm able to sort of impart some of my own insights today, talking about how we can be proactive, what's helpful and not helpful in terms of preparation, and then how we can be more responsive to others. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through some of our frameworks here at the Arbinger Institute. Many of you are already familiar with a lot of our ideas and concepts, and I'm going to relate them to these insights that I have for you. So without further ado, what I want to do before we kind of dive in is I want to do a quick poll. So, so the poll question, you see it on the screen here. It's, do you feel that your organization was highly prepared for COVID-19 and all the changes that followed? And so look, there's just 3 answers on here: highly prepared, somewhat prepared, or not prepared. So go ahead, take a moment, don't overthink it. Just think about your own organization and how prepared you were for this particular pandemic. And so, Dave, if we could go ahead and put the results up, that would be fantastic. There we go. All right, so this is actually really good news. 55% of you were somewhat prepared, so that's great. 11% of you highly prepared, fantastic. And then 34% of us were not prepared. So, so great. This is a fantastic time to really sort of reflect on what lessons we're learning right now and how we can prepare for whatever's next. Because the one thing that is certain in life is that there's always going to be change. And so how can we best prepare for whatever is going to be thrown at us next? All right, so here at Arbinger, I know most of you are probably familiar with what we refer to as mindset, but for those of you who aren't, let me give you a brief explanation. So oftentimes in organizations, we focus on changing behaviors. When we want to reach a new goal, a new level of productivity, a higher level of achievement, whatever that is, we tend to focus on behaviors. And behaviors are really important. But here at the Arbinger Institute, we talk about something called mindset. Mindset actually underpins behaviors. It drives and informs our behaviors. And so what is mindset? What do we mean when we say mindset? Mindset is essentially the lens in which we see. It's how we actually see things, how we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see changes, challenges, how we see this pandemic, how we see working from home, right? It's the lens in which we see. Now, when we're talking about mindset, we actually can fall into one of 2 mindsets. And so you see it right here on your screen. The first mindset that we have in blue on the left is outward mindset, what we call an outward mindset, where we're not focused on ourselves, we're really focused on the collective, we're focused on our results. We are concerned about ourselves, but we're also concerned about others. Again, it's the collective. We're responsive to others. We're alive to the people that are around us. We know that they have needs, challenges, and objectives, and headaches, and things that keep them up at night that are really probably not so much different from us. And so we're responsive to that. And we also see ourselves as together rather than apart or separate. Now, we can compare this way of seeing, this outward mindset, to inward mindset, which you also see here on your screen. Inward mindset, we also refer to it here at Arbinger, we refer to it as being in the box, because it sort of limits our field of vision. Inward mindset, I'm really only focusing on myself, on my own results, maybe on my own department, my own team, our objectives, all the projects and timelines and deadlines that we have to meet, right, as a team. And so it's more of sort of a self-concern. It can be well-intentioned, but we're more focused on ourselves, and we may not realize that sometimes. And how it sort of manifests is that we can actually become really resistant to others, and we can become isolated. We can actually end up siloing ourselves off, or even siloing our team off from others. So those are two ways of seeing, two mindsets. So moving forward, we actually have 4 different styles of this inward mindset, of what we call being in the box. And so let's look at these 4 inward mindset styles. So first, we've got 2 styles where we actually sort of see ourselves as counting more than others, as mattering more than others. It's 2 styles where we place ourselves above others. And the first is called a better than style. And it's pretty self-explanatory, this one. I actually feel like I count more than others, that I matter more than others. Maybe because I have a leadership title, that I'm smarter than others. Maybe I feel like I'm more competent than others. Whatever that is, but I feel like I count more than others. I feel more superior, more important. Now we have another style where I place myself above others. And this particular style is a very close cousin to better than. It's got a lot of the same traits as the better than style, and it's called I deserve. So this I deserve style, same thing. I feel like I count more than others. I feel like I'm better than others, but it takes it a step further. Because I'm better than others, I actually feel like I deserve special treatment. I deserve certain things. So again, maybe I've got this sort of leadership title, and I actually do see myself above others, and therefore, maybe I deserve more time off. Maybe I deserve a higher salary. Maybe I deserve to have my camera off in meetings because I'm the leader, darn it. Whatever that looks like. But those are our 2 styles where we place ourselves above others. Now, we actually have 2 inward styles, 2 ways of seeing ourselves where we place ourselves beneath others. Still very much self-focused, but in an opposite way. So the first style here is called the worse than style. Now this worse than style, we're actually going to spend a little bit of time on today because it'll be kind of relevant to some of the insights that I'm going to talk about. So this is a style where we actually feel like we count less than others. We feel like we don't matter as much as others, that our worth is less than others. And we see ourselves as deficient in some way. So oftentimes this manifests in terms of thinking that maybe I'm not good enough, right? I'm not as successful as that person. I can't do X, Y, or Z because I'm not as talented. I don't have the capabilities, whatever that is. And so obviously this is a style that's really going to hold us back. It's very limiting. When we see ourselves as worse than others and not mattering as much as others, we do everything we can actually to justify that belief. We actually start seeing everything around us in a really self-fulfilling way that kind of thickens our worse than walls, that just justifies why we see ourselves as such. So for example, I know probably a lot of you, or maybe some of you, who are tuning in have been affected by furloughs and by layoffs. And so this worse than style, because I've been there before, is an easy one to slip into in a situation like this. Maybe we sit here and think, well, I won't get hired again because, look what happened the last time, or no one's hiring right now, or, I knew my boss didn't like me and now look what happened. So we can really easily sort of slip into this mode of thinking that we're not worthy. And so the problem with this is, just like other styles, is that it ends up becoming our truth. We actually end up believing this. Obviously, it's not the truth. It's a false truth, but it leaves us stuck and it leaves us not open to other possibilities. By the way, this worse than style, or any of these styles, they can actually not just be how we see ourselves, but they can actually be sort of a mindset of an entire organization. And so again, if we look at this worse than style, as an organization, we could say, oh, there's no way we're going to weather this storm, right? We don't have the technology, we don't have the capabilities, we don't have the capital. We can do that same thing. The worse than style is the I can't style, and it just really kind of leaves us stuck. So we'll continue to talk more about this style, but that's worse than. So we're going to go to our final inward mindset style here. Again, a way of seeing myself. And this one is called the need to be seen as style. So this is a style, again, close cousin to the worse than style, where I feel like I count less than others. I have feelings of maybe being deficient in some way. But I don't want others to know that I actually see myself in this way. So I try to cover it up. I try really, really hard to sort of not let that out. And so, so need to be seen as can absolutely get in our way as well. A lot of perfectionists live in this particular style. Myself as a recovering perfectionist, I know this style really, really well. We'll talk more about this here in a minute. So now that I've either refreshed you or familiarized you all with the 4 styles, we are going to now look at some insights in the middle of this sort of pandemic on what it means to be proactive and preparation. Things that I found are maybe not so helpful to preparation here. And so my first insight is this. We see it real big on the screen right here. And it's, we cannot anticipate and plan for everything. And by the way, we shouldn't even try. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. We should not even try. So I have to share with you all, or really confess, that I am the queen of what-ifing situations. And maybe you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you can relate to this, or maybe you know someone who does the same thing. But here's what I have to say about what-ifing situations. Don't do it. It's completely exhausting. Completely exhausting. It's mentally taxing. It's emotionally draining. It's really intellectually tolling when we could be using this energy in more productive ways. And besides the impact on ourselves and how it's holding ourselves back, there's an impact on those around us as well, right? Think of how exhausting and draining that is for everyone around us when we kind of spiral into what-ifing worst case scenarios, which again, I am a professional in that. Several years ago, I worked for an organization who was experiencing significant growth and change. It felt like we were changing the tires on the bus as the bus was moving. And I know many of you know what that feels like. It's really not a good feeling, but you're just kind of trying to keep your head above water. Now, as we were experiencing this growth and change, we were having a significant staffing shortage. Which really kind of invited me into the box. And I sort of lived in this state of self-concern surrounding the staffing shortage. And so I remember, you know, we had lots of meetings to sort of like prepare and plan for the staffing shortage and how we were going to make it through and how we were going to make it out of it. But it was not enough for me. So I would constantly set up more meetings, and I'd talk to people in the hallways, just what-ifing the situation to death. Well, what if we hire this person and they leave? What if we hire this person and it creates more work for me and I don't have time for that? And so, I mean, it was really exhausting for everyone around me and for myself. It was like this hamster wheel. So there were a couple things going on here. And the first was obviously fear. It was really consumed by the fear of never crawling out of this sort of staffing shortage, this hamster wheel. But the interesting thing is I was actually creating the hamster wheel myself by what-ifing the situation to death. The other thing that was happening is that I was really primarily concerned with how the staffing shortage was going to impact me. And so that really just perpetuated this hamster wheel. And so obviously we can already, I know you guys are already there, but you're thinking about how I was probably in the box. I had an inward mindset, and absolutely, I was focused on how these things were impacting me. And so look, the worse than style causes us to think of all the ways that we can't, right? And I was doing just that. And again, totally draining, totally exhausting. And as I was sort of focused on the whole, I can't, and I don't have enough this, I don't have enough that, that actually became my justification for not coming up with creative solutions to this. So that worse than style can be really tricky like that, but it's incredibly self-limiting. I'm sure you all know the quote from Henry Ford, whether we think we can or we think we can't, we're right? So we have to be careful how our thoughts end up becoming who we are. We can also relate this what-ifing syndrome to a need to be seen as style. For example, if I need to be seen as sort of like in control, right? I'm going to try to doomsday scenario plan everything so it looks like I've already planned for it and we're good, right? And I'm in control. So speaking of in control, of being in control, my insight number 2 here is that we should really focus on what we have control over. If we sit here and we focus on all the things that we don't have control over, that's a really easy, nice invitation to go into the worse than box and to just kind of spiral. Because we'll be focusing on all the things that we really don't have any control over, and it just kind of leaves us really stuck. Now, something we do have control over is our mindset, right? We absolutely have control over how we see things, over how we react, over how we respond. We have control over how we see this pandemic right now. If we stay clear-minded and if we focus on the us instead of just me and my needs, possibilities become clear, and there may very well be opportunities that come out of this pandemic that we're experiencing right now. Maybe innovation, collaboration. So focus on what we can control, try to avoid those things that we can't control, and try to avoid anticipating and preparing for just anything and everything, because we'll just spin our wheels. All right, our third insight here is that we can't go it alone. That as leaders, as parents, as individual contributors, we can't go it alone, and we don't have all the answers, and we don't have to have all the answers. I think many times, if you're a leader out there or a manager, we feel like, especially during times of stress, that we've got to just shoulder everything, right? We've got to be everything to everyone, and we've got to have all the answers. And that's just simply not true. And it's completely unrealistic. And so, at the Arbinger Institute, we talk a lot about how we are always with others. We're always in relationship to others, even when we're alone. And so there's really two ways that we can lead right now. And that's sort of, we can be an isolated leader or a together leader. And the isolated leader probably has some sort of inward mindset styles going on. And so, for example, if I have a better than style, perhaps I might see myself as more isolated, right? I might see myself as the one who can do everything, the one who knows everything, the one who has all of the answers. But it's interesting, having a better than style in this situation, what does that imply about how I see others? Well, that implies that they're worse than me, right? That maybe they're unable to contribute, that they're not as competent as me, that they don't have the skills or the talents. And what that does is that robs them of the ability to grow and develop and contribute. Do you know the people who actually who try to do everything, right? Who actually try to do everything themselves, try to have all the answers, and then they resent those who don't help them, even though they wouldn't allow help? Well, that's me. That's me, and it's really not good, and it's really, really unproductive. All right, so need to be seen as style, I think, could apply here as well. Needing to be seen as having all of the answers, needing to be seen as sort of in control. But the interesting thing is really, the reality is that it takes more than two eyes to look into an unknown future. We cannot do it all. So we need to engage people. We need to engage our teams. We need to engage different business areas, right? We need to engage our customers. And we can be vulnerable, right? We can be honest and admit that we, in fact, don't know it all, that we are in uncharted waters here. All right, fourth insight here. So it's likely that the leader that we are today is the leader that we were a month ago or 2 months ago, right? So before this all started. So what I mean here is that we probably haven't changed through this quarantine, through this pandemic. If anything, we're probably leading the same. And maybe if we were leading from the box or leading from sort of inward ways, those qualities are probably more amplified now during times of stress. Right now is really a time when I think people are expecting change, right? We all know times are uncertain right now. Change is actually acceptable and expected. This doesn't mean that the change is going to be easy. It's certainly going to be challenging. But this new world, whatever our new normal becomes, it requires change. It's going to require change. And so let's not waste this opportunity as leaders, as parents, as friends, as neighbors, whatever that looks like. Let's not waste this opportunity to consider how we ourselves might need to change as well. And so again, if 2 months before this started, I was leading with one of the inward mindset styles that we've talked about today, it's likely that I'm probably still doing the same. If I was a really busy, chaotic, reactive leader before this, I'm probably still busy and maybe brewing some chaos and reactive. And so all I'm asking is, I think we need to think about these things. Now, we received quite a few questions on how to work proactively versus reactively. And if I am working reactively on a regular basis, does this mean that I have an inward mindset? So that's a great question. It's a big question. I actually get it all the time. And I'm going to talk about this more with Sarah in our Q&A that she talked about, that you'll be able to see on our website. But I think that that's the question we should be asking ourselves. You know, obviously, we probably find ourselves in a very reactive mode right now. But if we were always leading from sort of a reactive space, take some time to reflect on, are there any inward mindset styles, or just inward mindset in general, that maybe was driving that reactive leadership style of mine? And that's really for you to sort of reflect on. I don't know the answer to that. But you know, it's a common organizational problem. We get bogged down in the day-to-day stuff, meetings, answering emails, putting out fires. And so, you know, maybe you can ask yourself, is everything really that urgent? You know, why haven't I carved out time to be more proactive and reflective? And what might that look like for me? What might it look like if I did lead from more of an outward mindset, if I kind of shedded my boxes? You know, what's scary about that, right? Now is a great time to be reflecting on this stuff. And so in the spirit of taking time to reflect on our own leadership, or even as a parent, again, as a sibling, as a friend, as a neighbor, I have a bit of a tool for you guys that I want you to just kind of reflect on. And, you know, I don't know that we'll have enough time, so you might want to just kind of screenshot this if that's helpful to you. But many of you who are familiar with our work know about what we call a mindset change tool that we refer to as the outward mindset pattern. So there's 3 parts of this pattern. And the first part is, we actually call it SAM for short, because the first part of this pattern is to see others. So that's where the S comes from, to get really curious about others, right? What are they struggling with right now, right? How must life look for them right now? What is work like for them right now? And so I have, in the spirit of today's presentation, I've got a couple questions for the see others piece. What kind of leader or individual contributor or colleague do others need me to be? What kind of spouse, parent, friend, neighbor do others need me to be? So our second sort of reflection question here is under our second part of our outward mindset pattern, which we refer to as adjusting our own efforts. So essentially what we do is we adjust our efforts based on what we learn in those first questions after we've done some reflection. And so how can I work more proactively and responsive to others instead of working reactively and resistant to others, right? What are some things that I can actually change to be more proactive and more responsive versus reactive and resistant? And then finally, measure impact. That's our third piece of this particular SAM tool. How much time will I allot on a weekly basis to reflect on the above questions? And how will I check in with others so that I know I'm being the person that they need me to be, whether it's in times of crisis or in times of calm? How will I measure that? So with that, I'm so glad that you all joined us today. I hope this was helpful. These were, again, some of the insights that I've really reflected on, and how my own inward styles kind of creep up and drive these sort of unhelpful things that I tend to do during times of stress. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to kick it back to you. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you, Beth. It's such a pleasure to have you here. I really love that discussion about the box. Personally, boy, am I comfortable in that need to be seen as box. That's something that I'm always having to work through. I wanted to share from the chat, Chris from Orlando, I really liked what you had to say in your comment, which was, being outward isn't about doing everything. It's about doing what you can. And that, I think, is just such a great takeaway. Chris, that's such a fantastic observation. So today's presentation, Proactivity, Preparation, and Responsiveness, insights on how to move forward with Beth Hannan. That was recorded. You will receive a link to that in your email later. And as Beth mentioned just before she signed off here, she and I will be doing a Q&A together where we will talk a little bit more about not only what she spoke on here, but answering more specifically some of the questions that have come up during this presentation as well as before. And it's a nice opportunity to kind of dig in a little more deeply to those questions. And I personally love doing it with all of the webinars up until now. Most of the webinars up until now, I've had the opportunity to sit down with our presenters, have these Q&As. They are recorded separately and live exclusively on our webinars page. So if you want access to those, which I highly recommend, they've been really popular, both the Q&As and our previous presentations up to this point, go to arbinger.com/webinars where you can request access to those things. After this presentation, please head over to our LinkedIn. I've seen a couple of Arbinger folk pop up in the chat. Come over to LinkedIn, follow us there. That's the best way to see what we have coming up, including some exciting new product announcements and other just cool stuff that we're constantly putting out. And it's a great opportunity to highlight for us where we see the outward mindset being in action all over the world. We also are active on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So your social media of choice, come find us there. While you're over on LinkedIn, go find Beth, connect with her, tell her how awesome she was today. Please join us next week. We have a highly anticipated third presentation in this series by Rob Newson. He's a retired Navy captain and the current VP of Vision and Strategy for the Philadelphia 76ers. So please invite your network to participate in that. I'm really looking forward to it and the conversation that I will get to have with him. It is the 5 pillars of focus, insights of a Navy SEAL. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Beth Hannan, for taking time from your lovely home in Austin, Texas. It's so great to see you. It's wonderful to see all of you here. I'm Sarah McMullen from the Arbinger Institute. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.